Hello everybody. Welcome to creating the basic adaptable game engine library, part 16, Canvas and Animation. In the previous video, we did a really quick introduction to JavaFX, which is a framework you can use in Java to create windowed-based applications. And in the previous video, we created a Hello World style application, a window which contains the text, Hello World. In this video, we're going to turn our attention to graphics. We'll learn about a few more classes we can use in JavaFX, one of them being a Canvas class, and we can use that to draw graphics on. And we'll talk about animation. In this case, animation is just very simply moving an image across the screen over time. And so those are the goals. We're going to build on the code from the last movie or the last video. So let's go ahead and take a look at the classes we need to learn about. So here are the 5 classes we're going to need to create our basic animated canvas-driven example. First, we'll use something called the Canvas class. That's basically a region where images are drawn that'll actually fill up our entire window. To draw on the canvas, we require another class called Graphics Context. And it really has all the methods that you need to draw on the canvas. The canvas is kind of like a receptacle for the image data, and the graphics context does the work. There's a color class, which you can use if you want to draw shapes of a particular color. It would store things like red, green, blue value data. There's an image class, which we can use to load images from external files, and we'll very much use those in drawing. And finally, there's a very convenient class called Animation Timer. It sets up a loop that automatically runs at about 60 times a second. Not a section, but 60 times a second. All right, those are the 5 classes we're going to need. So next, let's head over to IntelliJ. This is the code we used last time. This was our test JavaFX class. So we'll just keep using this class rather than retyping everything out. So we've got our 5 import statements from last time. We're going to get rid of the label and replace that with a canvas. And the one change is I actually added some comments, and if you download this from GitHub, you will get the commented version of this code. But as a really quick review, all JavaFX windowed programs, they extend the application class. It's an abstract class which requires you to write a start method. Launching an application creates a window, which is managed by a class called stage. You can do things like set the title. You can use a pane to lay out its contents. It's really basic, but that's all we need. And within the stage hosts a scene, and we need to pass it a root object, and that's the root of a scene graph, a tree-like data structure, which stores everything that we're going to see. And we can also set the size if we want. Otherwise, you can have it automatically resized to its contents. Then we attach the scene to the stage, and we can add the different things. In this case, we added a type of node called a label, which is used for displaying text. Add that to our scene graph, and then make the window visible. And at the end, we had a driver method, our public static void main string bracket args. You know the drill. Application class comes with a method called launch, which gets everything started, initializes the stage, and then passes control over to our start method. And last time we saw that when we ran this, let's go ahead and run. This will give us a very basic window, which says Hello World. And there we go. And in this video, we're going to replace this with an image of a bouncing ball. Okay. So one of the very subtle changes I've made in my setup, and one that I recommend you do as well, we're going to be using images in our programs from this point on. And we want to keep our code organized. So the root directory of my project is a folder called bagel_java. because this is a Java implementation of the Bagel class structure. Within that folder, I've actually made a new subfolder called Images. I'm going to use that to store all the images. In theory, you could throw images in the same folder with all your test code and your source code, but that's really not a good idea. You want to keep your code organized. And if you're using IntelliJ, you can just right-click and create a new directory. And inside that directory, you can download an image that I'm going to post to GitHub as well. I just put in an image of a basketball because I found it quickly with the Google search. All right, and that's the image we'll use in this application. But another thing we've got to be careful about, when we refer to the image, we have to know where the image folder is relative to our code folder, and we'll talk about that later. But again, to get things started, you might want to create an images folder and put some kind of an image in it. Now, it doesn't have to be a basketball, it can be anything you want. Okay, going into our application code, the first big change that we're going to make is we're going to go ahead and get rid of the label. And instead of adding a text label to the window, we're going to add a canvas to the window. And this will just be a very simple canvas called canvas. So canvas equals a new canvas. The only parameters we need are how big the canvas is going to be. I'd like it to match the size of our window. I'd like it to be a perfect fit. So make that 800 by 600 pixels. As always, I need to go ahead and import that class. So Alt-Enter. And right up top, that import statement was javafx.scene.canvas.C canvas. And IntelliJ grays out labels since we're not using it anymore. So I could delete it. Might as well, keeping the code clean and organized. In addition to adding a canvas, I need some way to draw on that canvas, and that's what the graphics context class is all used for. So graphics context, it needs to be attached to this canvas, and so the canvas object actually generates the context object for us. So I'll say canvas.getGraphicsContext2D. As always, I'm going to need to import something. So Alt-Enter. Oh, come on. Import class. There we go. It's also in the canvas directory there. Great. All right, so we've got our graphics context. Now I want to go ahead and create an image. I will call that image ball because it is an image of a ball. That's a new image. I'm going to say images/basketball.png. I'm using a PNG file because it supports transparency. The image class constructor in JavaFX takes a few more parameters. First, it takes, you can resize the image if you want. So I want to resize it to width and height 100 pixels so it doesn't fill up the entire window. And also, I'm going to scale it and keep the aspect ratio. Those two last parameters, just can always set them to true. I also need to go ahead and import this. In this case, again, there's different image classes. I want to use the one from JavaFX. We'll go check that out. JavaFX scene.image.image. Great. Okay, now I'd like to go ahead and, well, draw the ball on the canvas. And we do that through the intermediary, the context object. So context, say draw image, ball. I'll draw it at, I don't know, somewhere in the middle-ish. So 350, 350. All right, and the last thing we need to do, this is outlined in red because there is no more message object. Instead, I want to add the canvas to the scene graph. All right, so I've got my canvas. I've drawn something to it. I'm going to draw a ball there. Now let's go ahead and, oh, one more thing I was going to talk to you about. Now, when you organize your images or other assets into different directories, right? It's important that you specify the path of the directory correctly. So in particular, this was a little bit tricky for me to learn at first, so in case you're using something like IntelliJ. So when this code runs, right, it's going to look for a directory called images. But what's not being stated here is what is the root directory from which it looks. Is the root directory, the source code directory? Well, if the root directory was the source code directory, I would have to go down a directory, like .. go from source down to the main directory, and then go up to images. Right? Or that might not be the case either. Maybe this path is relative to the compiled class files, which in IntelliJ, they're stored in a nested set of directories over here, so we'd have to go down a bunch of directories. What we really need to do, at least for IntelliJ, is a way to specify what the root resource directory is. Right? So when it looks for images, it's going to look for that directory relative to this one. Right? So I want to specify that that's the root directory. Right-click on that, and then at this pop-up menu, you can go down to Mark Directory as the resources root. This is really important, otherwise you're going to get some file not found exception and your program won't run. All right, so just make sure that the path to your image is okay. Once that's set, then we can go ahead and run this file, and if everything goes according to plan, we should see a window with an image of a basketball roughly in the center. Or I guess it's a little bit lower than the center. But there you have it. We've got an image. Life is looking pretty good. The next thing I'd like to do is actually move this ball across this screen. Right? Instead of drawing it at some constant position, let's draw it at some X and Y position and have the X and Y values change. Right? So in order to do that, to get that working, we're going to create something called an animation timer. As I mentioned before, animation timer is a class that runs 60 times per second, just kind of automatically. I'm doing something a little bit interesting here. This is an example of something called an inner class, where I'm actually creating an instance of the animation timer class within my test Java FX class. So what I want to do here, this is a class which will automatically run once I tell it to start. But animation timer is an abstract class. Right? The reason this is red right now, a couple reasons. First, I need to import a class. So I'll do Alt-Enter. Okay. And so that's javafx.animation timer. So this class is underlined in red squigglies because it's a class that requires a method called handle. In other words, this class is going to run 60 times a second, but every time it runs, you need to tell it what it should be doing. And you do that with a method called public void handle. And this takes as its parameter a long variable called nanotime, which is just however many nanoseconds have elapsed. In this case, what I would like to do, I'm going to take this bit of code where I draw the ball, I'm going to move it to within this line of code. I'd also like to create some variables, right, X and Y. I'd like to draw it at that position. And so, of course, I haven't actually declared what X and Y are yet. They're going to be doubles. But I'm going to declare X and Y. Because this is an inner class, right, in order for it to see X and Y correctly, I actually need to declare those at the class level up here. So let me create a public double named X and a public double named Y. So I'll create some variables right here. And then, before I actually get started with the timer, I'll set the starting position. Maybe I'll start at 10:10. Kind of random. And then when the program runs, maybe I'll add 2 to x, and I'll add 1 to y. All right, so now timer is an object which will run this code 60 times a second. However, I must also tell the timer to start. Right? So, I think that's everything we need. Let's go ahead and give this a try. There is one small glitch you're going to see. I wonder if you've guessed what it could be. Let's go ahead and run this class here. And so this should draw a basketball moving across the screen. And do you see what's happening here? Do you see this kind of smeared image? Well, the code is doing exactly what we asked it to. It keeps on drawing the basketball at these different positions. However, it doesn't erase where the basketball was before. So in this case, we have to do something before drawing our image called clearing the canvas. And the idea is once we've drawn our objects, to kind of start over with a fresh window, we're going to draw a single solid colored rectangle on top. So let's try, this will be context, and let's set a color too. Let's set a fill color here. I'm going to use the color class. Wow, there are so many colors to pick from. I don't even know what some of these colors are. Papaya Whip sounds amazing. Let's use Alice Blue. It's first in the list. Right, and then once we set the color we want to use, we'll create a filled in rectangle starting at top left corner, 0, 0. We want it to fill up the entire screen. Right, so 800 by 600. Now we should see a single ball moving without kind of a trail of smeared images behind it. And the background should be Alice Blue. And there we go. This Alice Blue is a very light tinted blue. But there you have it. You have your first example of a graphics-based animation. Right, a lot of really good classes here. Very helpful. Oh, and the color class that got imported, that was Scene Paint Color. Great. Everything's looking good. We're getting really close now to being able to use the sprite class and being able to test that out. Right, along the way, we learned how to draw images onto a canvas. In a soon-to-be coming-up video, we're going to be drawing the images that are stored within a sprite at the coordinates of the sprite. And again, to link this with an earlier video, you might have remembered when we wrote the draw method for the sprite and the entity and the group classes. Do you remember we used something called graphics context? Right? That's related to this graphics context, which we're going to be using now. All right, this is looking really good. I need to go ahead and upload this to GitHub for you all to download and take a look at, but hope you enjoyed putting together your first animated program in JavaFX. Thanks for watching.